Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC. Today we're doing the full review of the Hobao Racing Hyper VS2. This is a 1/8 scale nitro powered four-wheel drive race buggy. It's been out for about, 6-8 months. Came out in 2022. It is obviously the update to the Hyper VS, which had been around for a couple years, and does feature quite a few changes, as well as an increase in price. It's also $605 here in the US. If you want to pick up one of these, or pretty much any Hobao, I definitely recommend checking out Scott Fortin on Facebook. He is a authorized Hobao dealer in the US and will get you better pricing, honestly, than anywhere else you can pick one of these up. Super nice guy. I have had friends, I've used him for years. Definitely recommend hitting him up if you want to pick up a Hobao. Also, there is a Hobao buy and sell trade group up there on Facebook as well. I'll have links in the description below where you can check that out. This buggy, obviously, is an update to the VS. Some major changes are the inclusion of 7075 all aluminum parts. So the chassis, the shock towers are all have been upgraded. I think even this battery tray might be 7075, I'm not totally sure. They did also go to pivot ball suspension, steering knuckles here in the front as opposed to the C-hub style design on the Hyper VS. So total change. I think this is the first pivot ball suspension race buggy that they have had. They've used it on other vehicles, but this is the first one I can recall. It does feature a 0.30 cubic inch engine that is close to 5 cc's. It's like 4.9 something. So really large engine, much bigger than your standard race buggy engine. It does come in two versions as well. This is the ready to run, which includes everything that you need. They also have an 80% almost ready to run, which is obviously cheaper, but you will have to paint the body, glue up the tires, and include obviously your own engine and electronics. So the way this review works, we're going to be going through 6 different categories, talking about kind of the pros and cons in each category, giving it a rating from 1 to 5 stars, and that is as compared to the other Nitro RTR race buggies you can buy. The stuff from Kyosho, like the Inferno Neo 3.0 or the TKI 4 MP9, stuff like the Serpent SRX8, the Losi 8, the HPI Racing Vorza, and Trophy 3.5. So I'm lucky enough to have pretty much every ready to run race buggy you can buy out there. So I'm going to be giving it a rating from 1 to 5 stars as compared to those other vehicles. 3 stars would mean it's average among this. It's not a bad score. It just means it's kind of typical of what you might expect within this class. 5 stars would be best in class, and 1 star would obviously be worst in class. So let's get into the review. And the first category is the engine and electronics. As you can see, it does include the Hobao Hyper 3.0 turbo style engine, so it does use a turbo plug. It is a 0.30 5cc sized engine, so pretty large engine, very powerful. It does have a really nice, like, polished tuned pipe, including, sort of your race style spring connector rather than the rubber, zip tie style. So it's a little more reliable. I do like that quite a bit. It does have a pull start, although it is kind of a 2-piece design. So you got this big old green handle that you got to connect onto that pull start and rip it that way. Not really a fan of this, I'll be honest with you, because it's just something, again, you have to remember to bring along. If you forget that, it's pretty hard to pull it using that. So I would have preferred a traditional T-handle style, but it obviously does work. 2-needle carburetor seems to work pretty well. On the electronic side, it does have these Hobao steering and throttle servos, the 5518 Metal Gear waterproof servos. Work totally fine. I wouldn't say they're like super fast or super torque or anything like that, but they are adequate. Work totally fine. Does have a nice aluminum servo horn, which I do enjoy. Battery-wise, it will need sort of this flat lay-down style battery pack. It is really, really small, so the best battery I would recommend is this, the Electron Pro Life battery, 6.6 volts. It does fit. Anything larger than that would be really, really tight. Even that one is pretty tight, but that would be the one I recommend. Radio-wise, it does come with this, the HB 2.4 gigahertz V2. Not a fan of this radio. It does have a foam wheel at least, but I found it very difficult to use. These buttons and stuff, there's sort of like this audio tone that kind of goes up and down. There's no display. I would have preferred just dials all the way around or something a little bit more basic. I'll be honest with you, I used this like once to start the vehicle, but after that, pretty much swapped it out, because that would be something I think would be definitely well worth upgrading. Hopefully, if you already have a radio with multi-model memory, you can just buy a receiver, stick it in here, and use that. Battery tray wise, yeah, here's a little receiver box. A little bit annoying that you can't open this all the way, so I found it A little bit annoying to change out the receiver, but that does actually work. Standard on a switch, waterproof, of course. Yeah, but engine electronics wise, super powerful motor. This is definitely the most powerful motor that comes on any RTR 8-scale Nitro buggy. Obviously, it's kind of a cheater motor. It's much bigger than your standard motor, which is going to be 0.21 rather than 0.30. So it's about 50% bigger. Tons of power, more in the mid to high end range, I would say. The low end, a little bit hard to get it to fire cleanly off the bottom ends, but once it builds at revs, it does launch itself pretty spectacularly, very, very fast. Servos wise, I think they're pretty typical. Radio wise, I would say this is honestly one of the worst RTR radios I found, so I would consider that almost unusable. I mean, you can use it, but I would say that's well worth picking up any like $30 radio or better off the bat if you can. So engine electronics wise, I'm going to give it an average rating. I think the engine's above average, obviously much more powerful. I think the radio is below average, the servos are about average, so all the way around kind of balances out and gives it a 3-star rating in the engine and electronics category. Design-wise, this is pretty interesting design. It does have a 4mm 7075 aluminum chassis, really, really thick. It does have some motor screws that kind of stick out from the bottom, so I'm not a big fan of that because you can definitely sort of ground down the heads of these screws, but that's not uncommon. My Kyosters are the same way. Aluminum hinge pin braces, ABCD blocks. It does have an upper aluminum top brace here on the front for the steering rack, and as well as a plastic overlay, so that's rather interesting. Nice aluminum shock standoffs, fully aluminum shocks all the way around. I think they're 16mm with aluminum shock caps. They're kind of a two-piece design like all the Hobao vehicles, so they do have this plastic insert here up top and then the sort of aluminum retaining screw. Quick release tray, so it's pretty much just like 2 screws here in the front, and then you kind of like squeeze this in and you can kind of pop that off. You will have to remove the servo horns to remove that, but it is pretty cool. You can remove this whole thing. It does have a little mount for a timing sensor, so that's pretty cool. Receiver box, very, very spacious. Battery tray, way too small in my opinion. I wish they went sort of 2 or 3 millimeters bigger in every direction, especially in the height. The height is really small and it does kind of slant down, so just be aware of that. Dual disc brakes, of course. Nice carburetor, 2-needle, no issues there. Turbo style plug. Does have kind of an interesting mount for the body, so it just has kind of this post here in the back. You slide on the body, so you just kind of slide the body in the back, and then a single body pin up here in the front. The vehicle's quite durable overall. It does have nice shock boots in the rear. It does have little mud guards to protect them from all the fuel and dirt and everything that comes off the front tires. All aluminum 17mm hexes, of course, and the pivot ball suspension, like I mentioned. Fairly beefy turnbuckles here in the front and rear. Especially on the camber block sides, they are all aluminum. Of course, all your typical adjustments, sway bars front and rear, different shock mounting or camber mounting locations here in the back. You can move them up and down. So yeah, pretty nice overall. I don't think there are any inserts in the hinge pin blocks, so they are kind of fixed position pills or whatever. I don't think you can change them out, but yeah, design wise, there are some things I like. Definitely the quick release tray I think is nice, although I don't like the battery compartment. The engine wise, it's super powerful, but design wise, it's not race legal. So if you actually want to take this to your local track, you would not be able to race this particular engine. You would have to swap it out. It looks like Hobao maybe makes a 0.21 sized engine for the Hyper VS2. I could not find it for sale in the US. Maybe they are available in Taiwan or other countries out there, but at least in the US they don't sell that particular one. Pivot ball suspension, some people like, some people don't. I'm not, biased one way or another, but it's just something interesting to be aware of. And then the polished tune pipe I think is excellent. Certainly a cut above what you typically find. Downsides, I don't like the air filter. That was kind of a big annoyance. It just kind of covers the whole thing, kind of flops around. I would recommend swapping that out. And then you can even use the low-C style mount there for the other end of the air filter to use a body clip, and that's pretty much it. Design wise, I think it's got some pros. Again, I think it's got some cons. It does have a 150cc sized tank, which again I don't think is race legal. I think you have to stick to 125cc, so you may have to swap that out. So again, design wise, it is a race vehicle, but you may have to make some modifications. And really the number one thing I would say I really don't like about this vehicle is the pull start. Having the separate handle that sometimes can slip out while you're trying to pull start it, or you might forget this or lose this or something like that, I think is a fairly large annoyance. I wish they would go back to kind of a standard style pull start. I do realize there is some sort of COPS design where I think it disengages the pull start, so you're not relying on that one-way bearing to basically be constantly running and robbing you of power, but I do think for a ready to run that's not really necessary, so I would get away from that. So overall in the design category, I'm going to give it 3 stars. Does have some advantages, does have some disadvantages in my opinion. Overall, pretty typical, pretty average overall. There are things that kind of balance out, and in the end give it a 3-star rating. The Hyper VS2 runs pretty interesting. It is different. Engine is loud and powerful. That is probably the best thing about this vehicle. If you're doing drag races with your other nitro powered ready to run buggies out there, this is the one that's going to win because it is just the fastest. There's no replacement for displacement, and this has got the biggest engine, and it is the fastest buggy out there. Driving wise, it is kind of interesting. The pivot ball suspension, my opinion, kind of leads to a little bit of understeer. I would say the tires do not have particularly great traction. They're okay all the way around. I mean, they are kind of a race style pattern. They do kind of have this chamfered edges here, so the side bite is not particularly amazing. Even on road or asphalt, I did find it kind of understeer a fair amount. It is fairly rear weight biased as well. The engine, everything is actually further back on this vehicle than most, and then the engine is obviously much heavier than your typical race vehicle. The vehicle overall is quite heavy. It's probably the heaviest of the ready-to-run class, and it feels that way. It feels very solid. It feels very heavy, a little bit sluggish, a little bit kind of like a rear motor 2-wheel drive buggy in my opinion, because it's kind of lighter up front and then really heavy in the back, and it does kind of have that pendulum effect where it kind of understeers, but then sort of once you get it turning and lay on the power, it does tend to kind of oversteer. So I think it would benefit quite a bit from better tires, a little bit more suited for whatever terrain you're running. I did try it on asphalt. I did try it on a couple of different dirt surfaces, and just in general I'd say the tires probably could use some improvement. Otherwise, driving wise, yeah, it is big, it is heavy, it is kind of a little bit more sluggish through the air. It's fine. This wing does have different adjustments for the height and stuff like that, so you can definitely make some tuning. So overall, I would say performance-wise, you will want to do some tuning in the handling department. In the power department, it's way above average. It's actually the fastest vehicle by far. In the driving, handling, steering department, I would say it's one of the worst ones honestly out there. So I think they kind of balance out. It's fast, it's powerful, but definitely for driving it on a racetrack, I would say you definitely would want to make some tuning adjustments. Get to drive a little bit more on the front end, not so much on the back where it's really quite heavy. So performance-wise, I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think it's kind of average. Some pros and cons. This vehicle is kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing. I think there are areas where it's really strong. I think there's areas where it's kind of weak, and they kind of tend to balance out and make it kind of average. One area where the Hyper VS2 excels is in the durability category. This thing is a monster. It is a beast. All 70-75 aluminum parts. They are not going to break on you like the 60-61 stamp pieces you typically find on ready-to-run vehicles. That's kind of how they tend to bring down the cost, is using cheaper materials. But this is a really premium product. Everything on this thing is top-notch. The metals, the plastics, everything is really excellent. Quite durable. Even the engine seems like a beast. It's going to be hard to break. The body is quite thick, very sturdy body. The wing is massive, almost impossible to break. Seems like this is definitely a much stiffer and stronger wing than you typically find on a ready-to-run race buggy. So in the durability category, I had no issues whatsoever. I have not broken, bent, destroyed anything on this vehicle, and I've crashed it plenty of times and no real issues. I mean, even the chassis looks pretty good. It doesn't seem to get as scraped up and beat up as you would typically find on other ready-to-run nitro buggies. So that is even durable. So yeah, overall in durability category, I think that's one of the strongest points of this vehicle. 5 stars. I would say this is the most durable ready-to-run nitro buggy you can buy. I have pretty much all of them, and pretty much every single vehicle I've bent, broken, or destroyed something on the vehicle, but this one I have not. So that's kind of a testament to this. It is a very durable vehicle. If you're concerned about that, if that's something you really want, this is going to be the best choice in the durability category. Hobao is definitely a smaller brand here in the US. For the most part, you're going to have to buy products online and wait for them to show up at your door. Like I mentioned, check out Scott Fortin. He's an authorized dealer, so he carries all the parts. So you are able to buy all the parts, but for the most part, if you don't have them in stock, you will need to, order them online and then wait a few days. So that's kind of the main issue, I would say, with the Hobao Racing, or pretty much all Hobao Racing products. It's just a smaller brand. 95% of local hobby shops out there are not going to carry Hobao parts. If you walk into one and you say, yeah, I'm looking for this part for my Hobao, most people are not going to stock that, and so that's really the one downside, I would say, to this brand. It's just a smaller brand. If you're in Asia, if you're in Taiwan or something where Hobao is based, you probably have really easy access to parts, so it kind of depends on where you live. But here in the US, Hobao is definitely a smaller brand. Working on the vehicle, it does have the quick release tray, which kind of works, kind of doesn't. The things kind of get in the way, but certainly with 2 screws you can pop this whole thing off, which is really nice when you want to change out servos or change out the receiver or rewire the battery connector, add a switch, whatever. That's really nice. It does have the easy access diffs, like typical for most vehicles. It is kind of compact. I don't know if it's because the engine is really large, the fuel tank is really large. Everything's kind of really large on this vehicle, so it does take up a lot of space. So things are a little tight, but I had no issues, accessing anything, so I don't think that's a real concern. But in the support and maintenance category, I'm going to give it below average score 2 stars, just because it is harder to get parts. You will, occasionally be waiting for parts to arrive in the mail to get this thing back in running, and that's always going to be a downside to owning a Hobao racing vehicle. The Hyper VS2 sells for $605 here in the US. That is quite a bit of money. It is more than pretty much every other ready-to-run Nitro buggy you can buy. The Serpent SRX-8 is $500. The Kyosho Inferno MP9 TKI4 again is $500. The Low C is like $490. So this is $100 to $110 more than pretty much every other ready-to-run vehicle. Now, I do think you get what you pay for. The engine is way bigger, way more power than any other vehicle. It's probably a little bit higher end than those other engines you can buy and typically find on a ready-to-run. The 7075 parts are way nicer. I think the radio is a bit down, definitely one of the worst out there. But the tune pipe, the true race style pipe, I think is really nice. So overall in the value category, I'm going to get an average rating. Even though it is the most expensive vehicle, you get what you pay for, and that's how I rate the value category. Does this look like a $600, $605 vehicle? I think it does. The parts quality on this thing is premium. It is higher end than pretty much any other vehicle out there. The Serpent's really nice. The Kyosho is pretty nice as well, but this is made in Taiwan. It does have the 7075 parts. Everything, the machining, everything is quite nice. Hobao is known for having more premium vehicles, in my opinion, compared to what else you can buy. So for $605, I think it's pretty fair. You can always buy the almost ready to run 80% vehicle. That sells for $425, so a little bit cheaper, but obviously you will have to spend a few $100s on your engine and electronics and radio, as well as do some work to get it up and running. So yeah, value categorized, I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I think it's pretty fair what you get. It's not an amazing deal, it's not a bad deal, but kind of average for what you get. So final thoughts on the Hobao Hyper VS2 Nitro Buggy. I would say this is like a premium basher. It's got crazy amount of power. It's really nicely equipped. Probably the most nicely equipped buggy you can get out there. It is heavy, it is fast, it is extremely durable. You can definitely send this and not worry as much about breaking stuff as you can other vehicles. Even the pipe is more durable because it's got the spring-loaded attachment points rather than that rubber or silicone connector pieces that you typically find on these ready to runs. So durability-wise, it is high. Speed-wise, it is top. Really, the downside is I don't feel like this is quite exactly a race buggy. Like, if you showed up and tried to race this, you would obviously have to change out some things. The engine's not legal. The radio really is not going to be usable for a racing environment. I think also the tuning of the vehicle needs to be done. The discs are really light in oil, so I would definitely probably thicken that up. Probably look into some different tires. These don't seem to have as much traction as some other vehicles out there. So yeah, racing-wise, I would say this is not going to be competitive out of the box, and you will definitely have to make some changes, some tuning adjustments and stuff. That is something you would have to spend some effort on to get as a race vehicle. But as a basher, this is probably really the nicest, most durable, fastest vehicle you can buy. So I think it's a little bit more appropriate for that type of environment. So yeah, anyways, Those are my thoughts on the Hobao Hyper VS2. The only thing I would say is my biggest criticisms, I hate this pull start. Honestly, I really don't like that two-piece design. If they just made it a standard pull start, I think I would love this car a lot more. It's just kind of annoying to have that separate handle. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the Hobao Hyper VS2. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.